We just figured out that we have known each other
Too long.
for too long, 40 years. I think 39, but Greg thinks 40. And we've had Greg's been doing shows here every 2 years ever since that time. So we lost count.
So it's got to be at least 20 or more shows.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
every time he does it, there's always a surprise. I never know what it's going to be. And here, this time, he did these beautiful, intimate pastels, which I've never seen him do before. And I think you just started kind of with, not pastels, not big ones like this, but these little, beautiful, intimate ones.
It's a new thing. A new thing. Yep.
So you guys are the first to see it.
Yay! Well, aren't you lucky? Thanks everyone for being here. It's great to see people that I haven't seen in a while and meet some new people. Let's see. My talk perhaps should be divided into a couple of sections. One, I'm going to talk briefly about pigments and about medium. Because most people think, well, you have oil painting and you have watercolor painting and you have pencil drawings. So there's a lot of different material you can use. But did you know that all color, that is the pigments, they're all the same? So if it's a watercolor tube and an oil tube have that in common. They use different vehicles to carry the pigment, oil-based or casein is actually a milk-based bonding agent, which is very old. It's one of the earliest paints. But pastels, which these are, use the same pigments. And where do the pigments come from? No, not Mars. They come from Earth. They come from Earth. And so basically, pastels are pigments that are squished together, raw pigments that are squished together with a minor bonding agent. So it's not that different than painting, except that it doesn't have to dry. It's already dry. So this is probably as dry as these are going to get. Unlike oil painting, which continues to dry and dry and dry. Some of you know that the bulk of my career has been watercolor painting. And that's a thing unto itself, of course. And transparent watercolors are different from other paintings because the light that you have, or the light you have left over, is generated by the white paper itself. So the material's inherently transparent. So the mechanics of it is that light hits the paper and comes back through the transparent pigments. That's how watercolors work. So I spent a lot of my career painting around things. And if any of you have seen my lace paintings, you say, well, how did you paint the lace? Well, the lace isn't painted. It's everything but the lace. So, I often say, well, I'm an ass backwards painter because you have to think in reverse. So a number of years ago, now these are not all brand new for the first time. A number of years ago, taking a little break from watercolor painting, I started messing around with pastels. And immediately the thing that was like electrifying for me was, wow, I can put down light marks on like a colored piece of paper. This is astonishing. So I really got into that. The other thing that's wonderful about them is that you can do different things with the material. You can do it very big like this, or you can do it delicately, and you can also put two colors next to each other and you can blend them. So it's like blending in an oil painting, but it's totally dry. And if you don't like something, you just wipe it off, which leads to some fear in people about the delicacy of them. But I often say, like I said to Rebecca, well, a belt sander on the Mona Lisa is not going to be too good either. So art is fragile, life is fragile. So, but they're great because I've seen really old, 300-400-year-old pastel paintings that looked like they were just done yesterday. So it's a wonderful material. A couple of these paintings, this is a little confession, a couple of these paintings started out, actually they have, and Rebecca doesn't even know this, they're actually a very loose watercolor painting under the pastel painting. as is the piece that's over here, the darkness of the trees in the foreground. That's actually a very loose watercolor painting. Why did I do that? That's to save on making a whole thing really dark, really dark. And also what I love to do, and I bet other painters like to do this, is not only do you might think, well, he had the sky and then he drew the trees in. Well, so much of what you see in the pine trees is actually subtracted from the dark framework of what the trees are. So you can actually, again, it's my old ass backwards thing. You can actually go back and forth, and I love to go in and put light in the trees where there's no light. So a lot of the tree work that you see is not necessarily just painting the branches, it's painting outside the branches, and that creates a really, really interesting effect. Where do I go now? The way this started for me, some of you know my son is an artist as well, and he does these very detailed colored pencil drawings. Now, colored pencil also the same pigments. It's just a waxy bonding agent that holds the shaft of color together. Well, a couple years ago, he had some pastel pencils, which I had never heard of. There are the traditional soft pastels, which are kind of like a fat crayon. And then there's something called new pastels, which are a kind of a blocky looking thing. And those are a little tougher. Those are a little harder than a soft pastel. And so you can kind of get a better edge. But when I said to him, I said, Jonathan, what are these? He said, well, those are pastel pencils. And I said, what? I've never heard of that. So I said, could I try some of those? And immediately I was just electrified by the fact that you could get a very fine point on this pencil and make an incredibly delicate line. And so this was like a whole nother part of pastel creation that I had not experienced. So things like that can really make you kind of jump a little bit. And some of you have heard that I grew up in a place called Syracuse, New York. And back in the day, they averaged about 200 inches of snow a year. So when I moved to Maryland and it didn't snow much, it was like, yay, I don't have to shovel. So, but then we had this drought starting about 3 or 4 years ago where we got no snow. And I used to tell people, I don't care if I ever see snow, I hate snow. Well, anyway, now it snowed and there was this beautiful dusting, and it was like, God damn it, it really is beautiful. And so that reawakened this whole, can you believe it, this whole fascination with snow. And the beauty of the way this is, it's like you can actually put the snow on the branches, which is just, again, I know it sounds silly, but it's like, this is so cool. I can actually put snow on the branches. And there's something, and there's something about the dryness of the material also that is almost like snowflakes itself. So it just seemed like an automatic marriage of idea and material. So those that I did with the pastel pencils are the smaller ones because I wasn't too adventurous to go start doing bigger things, but it could be done. Now, one of the problems with, and of course every material has a problem, right? One of the problems is the sharpening, because the material itself is pretty fragile. Okay, so I got a whole bunch of these pencils in. I tried to get electric sharpeners. Well, if you know how a pencil's put together, it's two pieces of wood, right, with a shaft in the middle, and so that goes around the color. Well, damn it, the two pieces of wood are rarely the same hardness. What do they care? So you put it in a sharpener, and then instead of a nice straight thing, it comes out like this because one side is really hard, and so the only way to do it is really with a hand sharpener, very carefully, or a very sharp razor blade. The problem with those things and they do work, is they get dull. So the real challenge to me for these was keeping the point sharp, but that's a small price to pay. But all of these mediums, they have different characteristics by the way light is reflected off of them. And there is a transparency to it. Yep, absolutely. I guess part of the appeal for me was that it was such a different way of working. And one of the other hazards is it gets all over you. So I actually ended up making kind of a maul that could slide over the drawing to keep my hand off it. The other thing that works is a piece of paper that you very gently put down, and then you can place your hand on the paper, as long as you don't do that with it. So these are little things that you learn, and after a while and maybe get better at it. This is the other thing too. You can put down some lines, and then to get it very even and smooth, you rub it back and forth. So you agitate it with your hands. So, but then after a while, it's like, yeah, those are pretty smooth. Mr. Mort, what happened to your fingerprints? Initially, when I tried pastels, I learned that was the thing to do, but it alters the surface of the material it makes it different, and I didn't like that. So people have asked, well, how long is it going to stay there? Well, after a while, some of it will fall off, but I do blow it off before I frame it to try to get the loose, because inevitably there's loose stuff on there. No, I was just against that, even though it creates supposedly a more permanent thing. But I didn't like the idea of the sort of the chemical spray. And watercolor paper, yes, absolutely. And there's different. The smaller ones do have a textural quality, but if you look at the big ones, they are Arches watercolor paper, and doesn't have much of a tooth. Hot press, yes. Now this is something interesting that I always ask people, because of the way we perceive things. The brain and the eye-brain thing is so weird. Now this is supposedly the moon behind a cloud. You see this gray area here? Yes. Would you believe me if I told you that gray area is identical to these? It's only because this is very light that your brain tells you this is darker. Isn't that wild? That's actually the same tone, the same. I know, yeah. And this is the problem. This is a terrible segue. This is the problem that early observers had of looking at Mars, because they would see the kind of pink bologna color of Mars, and then the darker areas would appear green because of the contrasting. There's no green on Mars, none at all, but it's like, must be vegetation. Yeah, so, but that's how the brain works, it's like, that is darker. You can't convince me that's not darker. Anyway, it's been a blast, and I congratulate the ladies here who have hung the show, because I was a little concerned of how it would all fit together, but you did a great job, everybody. Any other thoughts or questions? I'm all ears. As much as I can. Actually, the two larger ones are completely from the mind's eye, so they're not actual places. The smaller ones are some areas not near where I live. This tree is actually in our yard.
Beautiful tree.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. These might be the only ones I do.
That's sad but exciting all at the same time.
No, I don't know. It's a legitimate question, Rebecca, but I don't know what the next phase will be. It's
Spring.
Spring, yes, spring, yes, right. But I have enjoyed the journey, the fun of trying it different, and I'm glad that you all have got to see it, and that we're here to enjoy it together. I think because my first sort of love of artwork was drawing with a pencil, and I love there's a feedback thing that happens with, and this is why I don't have an iPhone, because there's no feedback. I need buttons. But with the pencil, there's tremendous feedback from the vibration, and also it's almost like you can feel the point on the paper. And certainly in watercolor painting, when you're doing delicate stuff, there's almost none of that. It's so imperceptible. But part of the thing is it's just an appealing tactile thing. Yeah, it's good feedback, you know. It's like sawing a piece of wood, you know, you get that nice.
Well, thank you, Greg, for all of your thoughts
Thank
on this
you.
beautiful collection.
Thank you.
Thank you.